My grandfather, blessed memory, was a great Torah sage, and I know I've spoken about him many times. And I want to share an idea that I witnessed personally, but I think it's a powerful idea that could change our lives. It's an idea that could alter our relationship with God. And the reason why I can say this with confidence is because what I'm going to share with you, and I've shared it in the past, but it's still important to reiterate. It's something that I saw myself. It's something that I think changed my life. And I think that the insight that it contains is a complete reimagination of what it means to have a spiritual connection with God. My grandfather was 90 years old when he passed. And some of my strongest memories come from what happened before he passed, at the last days of his life. He was very sick, and he was ill, and he was in tremendous pain, but he wasn't hospitalized. He was home. And the problem was that the whole night he was suffering. And to move was very difficult for him. So what they used to do is, instead of putting all the responsibility on my grandmother, they asked a different one of the grandchildren to spend the night with my grandfather each night. And thus there was one night that I got the privilege to spend an entire night tending to my grandfather. Again, he's 90 years old. He's a great sage. I'm 18 at the time. And in the morning, there's the prayer service, and they would have a minyan that have a prayer service in his house every morning. And I was there from 11 o'clock at night until 7 in the morning. Anyhow, something happened. It changed my life. What happened in the middle of the night? At 3 a.m., my grandfather wakes up. And the problem is I know he needs to sleep, and he's up. So what do? So I say to him, Saba, grandfather, it's 3 in the morning. Go back to sleep. He's like, well, is it time to daven yet? It's time to pray yet. And he says to me, I said to him, no, it's not time to pray. It's time to sleep. Prayer starts at 7:30. So he goes back to sleep, and a half hour later, he wakes up again and asks me the same question. It's time to pray. And I say to him, no, it's not time to pray. Now it's time to sleep. At 4 o'clock, he wakes up, and with eagerness that I couldn't overwhelm, he says, I'm getting up and getting ready to pray. And remember, mind you, prayer doesn't start for 3.5 hours. So he gets up, and I was taking care of him. So we had to get him dressed and, wash his hands and all that. It took me a half hour to get him ready. But he finally got ready. And, because he was a rabbi, he was like a real rabbi. He wore rabbinic garb. He had a rabbinic hat. He had a rabbinic frock coat. He had a nice rabbinic beard. Mine's kind of like a little dusting. Rod's a little closer. Rod's got more of a beard. It was a nice rabbinic beard. But he was 90 years old, one of the most famous rabbis in the whole country, in Israel. And he gets dressed and ready. And I cannot forget this image. The image is he is sitting in his small little foyer, his small little vestibule. It's like the size of this table. It's tiny. And he's sitting there waiting for prayer to start. And the only thing that I could evoke in my mind is the day before the trip to the amusement park. The day before the trip to the amusement park, what happens? All the kids are so giddy, they're so excited they can't sleep. Sometimes when I used to lead the services in shul on Yom Kippur, they start at 6 a.m. So how do you wake up at 6 a.m.? You have to have an alarm clock. Well, who has an alarm clock? Everyone has their phone. Problem is you don't use your phone in Yom Kippur. Because it's like Shabbos, we don't use any electronics. So how do you wake up? It's a problem. So what I used to do, and what happens? Because if you're the lead of the service in Yom Kippur, you can't sleep in. Oh no, because you're the one who's leading it. No one else is leading it. There's no backup plan. You have to be there. If you miss it, it's a disaster. So I remember I would wake up like at 3, at 4. I was like so nervous. I was like half sleeping with one eye open to make sure I don't miss it. My grandfather is 90 years old, and it's a regular Tuesday. It's a regular prayer service. We pray every morning. And he cannot sleep with anticipation, with excitement. And the irony of the story is that he actually did fall asleep. Like it was like 6 o'clock. He was just collapsed. He was exhausted, and he missed the morning prayer. That's the irony of the story. But to me, this was an image of someone who has a connection with God that's enviable. There's a concept called, we know that there's 3 daily prayers. Shachris is the morning prayer, Mincha is the afternoon prayer, and Ma'ariv is the evening prayer. And this corresponds to the 3 daily sacrifices in the temple. Alternatively, it corresponds to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And there's special times. The morning prayer is in the morning, and the afternoon prayer is from midday till dusk, and the evening prayer is from dusk throughout the night. So they invented in America a new thing called Mincha Ma'ariv, which is afternoon and evening prayer. Basically, it's you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What you do is, you do the afternoon prayer the very last time that you could do it, all the way when it's dusk time. And you do the evening prayer immediately afterwards, and that way you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That was the idea. And, that's the attitude that we have with prayer. My grandfather is like anticipating, he's excited, he's eager, he's looking forward to it. And ironically, or incidentally, he would never pray the morning prayer late afternoon. He would do the morning prayer right away in the morning, the afternoon prayer at the first available time, and the evening prayer at the first available time. And he said from his teacher that prayer is like the meals of the day. You have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No one says, hey, oh gosh, I got to eat lunch. Oh man, what a hassle. Oh, I have to eat dinner. Also, let's just do lunch and dinner together. Let's just make one big meal. Right? Well, brunch is just one meal. This is like, let's have lunch and then right away let's have dinner. No one does that because you eat, you're full, and then you get hungrier, and then you eat again. That's the way we work. Prayer is like that as well. Prayer is filling up your spiritual belly, so to speak. You didn't speak to God in 12 hours. You're hungry. You have to break the fast. You got to talk to God. You didn't speak to God since the morning. Don't starve yourself till it's the last moment before you could eat. Eat your spiritual fill in the afternoon. Eat your spiritual fill in the evening. That's the way he was. And I think that prayer is the most immediate connection that we can have with God. We talk about Torah. Torah binds a person to God, and we're still going to spend a lot of weeks and months talking about it, about what Torah is, what it's comprised of. We started talking about last week we spoke about the various components of Torah, and Torah is all the names of God, and Torah preceded the world, and all the kind of these weighty insights about Torah. But the way a person can have the most immediate, instant connection with God is with prayer. Torah is more of like an acquired taste. It takes more time for you to kind of grow into it. Maybe Torah is a more powerful connection with God, but the more immediate connection with God is prayer. And I think there's an insight that we could share that can change our perspective. I think there's one idea that lies at the foundation of building a relationship with God via prayer. And I see my grandfather, I'm like, oh my gosh, like his prayer and my prayer, they're not the same at all. My prayer is like, oh, I gotta pray. Oh no, I have to pray 3 times a day. How can we do this fastest? Sometimes sometimes they have truncated prayers. Like, when it's a festival, we don't say this prayer, or when it's this kind of day, we don't say that prayer. It's like it's always so exciting. Oh, we get to shorten it, right? And I see my grandfather, and he's like as excited to pray as I've ever seen anyone to do anything. And how do we bridge that gap? How do we make prayer from being maybe something that we have to do because we're trained to do it, something that becomes a habit, something that becomes a ritual, something that we have to go to synagogue or shul or go to some sort of facility, a venue that we pray in? How do we transform that to being like the most exciting part of your day? I want to share with you my idea. I have an idea, and I think it's a controversial idea, but I think it's true. A few weeks ago in the Parsha, we read about the splitting of the sea. Jewish people are surrounded by their enemies. They've just escaped from Egypt, absconded from Egypt, hightailed out of Egypt, and now they're running away. They're going to Canaan. Pharaoh and his henchmen discover that the nation is escaping, and they pursue them. And there's this standoff. The Jewish people are surrounded by water and by their enemies, and there's no place to escape. And what happens, of course, the water opens up, the water splits, and they're able to walk through the water, and the Egyptians make the ill-fated decision to follow them, and we know what happened. The water crashes down on the Egyptians while the Jews are walking in the dry land. That's described in the book of Exodus in chapter 14. But what happened before the splitting of the sea? Before the splitting of the sea, we read the following verse. This is chapter 14, verse 10. And Pharaoh got close. Pharaoh approached them. And the Jewish people, the sons of Israel, lifted their eyes, and behold, Egypt is traveling after them. And they were very terrified. They were very scared. And the children of Israel cried out to God. The nation's in trouble. They're in danger. They're surrounded by their enemies. And they right away call out to God. They pray. So is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? It's a great thing. You're in danger. You're surrounded by your enemies. You're on the brink of being destroyed. You pray to God. And you look at Rashi, the commentary of Rashi, and he says, the Jewish people are such a laudable nation. When they're in danger, they cry out to God. They're a nation of prayers. They pray to God. And in fact, this is the behavior of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham prayed, Isaac prayed, Jacob prayed. The Jewish nation is praying also. The nation is behaving in the way that we're trained to do by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. An amazing insight. What happens next? Fast forward 5 verses, and you read the following verse. God tells Moses, this is chapter 14, verse 15. So this is 5 verses from when the Jewish people prayed and were praised for it. God tells Moses, why do you cry out to me? Why are you praying? What are you doing? Tell the nation and they may travel. Is there a more appropriate time to pray than when you're surrounded by your enemies? We see there's a crisis. There's a danger. The nation is facing extinction. There's an existential threat. And the Jewish people cry out to God. And they're praised. And Moshe cries out to God. And God says to him, what are you doing? Why are you praying? It seems like Moshe is doing the wrong thing. But how do we reconcile that with the fact that the Jewish people are praying and that's the right thing? And Moshe prays and it's the wrong thing. Is this the appropriate time to pray? Or is this not the appropriate time to pray? It can't be both because it's the same time. In fact, you look at the whole Torah, all of Jewish literature, you won't find another case where someone's told not to pray. Prayer is almost always a good thing. Moshe's praying, and God says, no, don't pray to me. This is the only time that someone's told not to pray. How is it possible that there's the same crisis, same danger, the nation cries out to God, and they're praised? Moshe cries out to God, and God says to him, stop praying. Go travel. Moshe is praying apparently for the same reason, and his prayer is rebuffed. So all the commentaries talk about what exactly is going on over here. So the Ramban says that Moshe's prayer was too specific. He should have prayed in a more generic fashion. Others say that prayer maybe is not effective at this time because the nation needs to do something more righteous, and only after you do something righteous you earn the coupon, the spiritual coupon, so to speak, to be able to go have this miracle done. There is a wild midrash that says that Moshe is different than the nation. The nation needs to pray. Moshe needs to command. Moshe is someone who could command God and God obeys, which is a wild idea. Moshe is on the spiritual level that he doesn't need to ask. He needs to say. Whatever Moshe says, God will oblige. But everyone's wrestling with this question, why is God telling Moshe not to pray? Nation's in danger, and he says, don't pray? Is there a more appropriate time to pray? So you look at Rashi. Rashi says something very fascinating, very deep. Rashi says that there's two kinds of prayer. He calls one of them the long prayer, and one of them is a short prayer. The nation's in danger. And the nation cries out to God. They pray. They pray a short prayer. Moshe is praying also. He's also crying out to God. But he's praying the long prayer. And this time does not call for long prayers. It calls for short prayers. That's what Rashi says. What does it mean, a long prayer versus a short prayer? What's the difference between this type of prayer and that type of prayer? So here's the insight. When we pray, there's two reasons why we could pray. You know, I look at the Jewish calendar, and it says, okay, prayer starts at 8 o'clock. And the afternoon prayer starts at 6 o'clock. And the evening prayer starts at 9 o'clock. And then on Shabbos is this time, and that time, and that time. There's a fixed schedule of prayer. If prayer was about getting what you wanted, then only when you wanted something would you pray. You look at the calendar, there's prayer every day. Why is your prayer every day? It must mean there's a kind of prayer that has nothing to do with getting something that you want, because you don't necessarily want anything. There is prayer that is all about deepening your connection with God. We call that a long prayer. We call that a scheduled prayer. We call that a formal prayer. We call that a prayer that has a fixed text. That's the long prayer. There's a different kind of prayer. There's a short prayer. A short prayer is not going to appear on the calendar. You're not going to find out what time it is to go to the short prayer. It's not even every day. It's at a time of need. You need something, you have a short prayer, and you ask God to help you with what you need. There is a mitzvah to pray. However, the Ramban says the mitzvah to pray is only in a time of need. The Rambam says it's a mitzvah to pray every single day. Everyone agrees that there's a mitzvah to pray. The question is it the short prayer, time of need? Or is it the long prayer every day? The Jewish nation was in danger. They needed something. When you need something, you pray. What kind of prayer? The short prayer. The nation, they got it right. They prayed to solve their problem. Moshe got it wrong. He was trying to pray the traditional prayer, the daily prayer, the long prayer, the prayer that's sole objective is to get close to God. And God says to him, yes, that prayer is appropriate. But in this situation, this circumstance, the correct kind of prayer is the short prayer, not the long prayer. And in this area, the simple Jews, the masses, they were more on target than Moshe was. They recognized that this calls for a different kind of prayer. Okay, once we have this insight, I want to bring this home. I want to make the following controversial suggestion. And I made this suggestion in a shul once when I spoke. And the rabbi said, that's not controversial. I think it's still controversial. My controversial opinion is as follows. I think that we've been misattributing, or our prayer training has been done in a, shall we say, in the wrong order. Did you ever wonder why Moshe is making the wrong prayer and the nation's doing the right thing? Isn't it interesting that the nation gets it right and Moshe gets it wrong? Isn't it always the opposite? I think what it's telling us is that there's a beginner prayer and there's an advanced prayer. The beginner prayer for the nation, they're more simple than Moshe. They're not as advanced. And they're doing a beginner prayer. It's a short prayer. It's a prayer in time of need. And Moshe is much more advanced. He has the long prayer. He's already, he's a veteran in prayer, and therefore he's able to pray a longer prayer. I think that we've been trained with long prayer ahead of short prayer. My controversial opinion is that I think that children, or anyone really, who's taught to pray, they come to shul, they're given a book, read these words. Come at this time. Put on your kippah, make sure you're wearing a talis, make sure you're in the right place, make sure you're reciting in Hebrew. Right? We're given the formality of prayer, which is the modality of long prayer. I believe that children should be trained as much as possible to speak to God whenever they need something. You don't need to go to synagogue. You don't need to be in any sort of venue. You don't need to say in any language that you're not familiar with. You need to train yourself and train your children. Whenever you need something, you ask God for your help. And you know what? The Almighty is perfectly fluent in conversational and academic English. I've told my students before, when you're driving your car, and unless there's someone in the car with you, most cars you drive have only one passenger, you should be talking to God. But Rabbi, people will look at me and think I'm foolish because I'm talking to myself. So I used to say, okay, what I used to tell them is, go into a phone booth and make believe you're on the phone and just talk to God. There's going to be someone else on the end of that line. It's not going to be a person. It's going to be the Almighty. But now I tell people, yeah, but everyone has a Bluetooth. So everyone's looking at you. They're just assuming you're on the phone with someone. You could just talk to God. And when do you talk to God? How often do you talk to God? Every day. All the time. And yes, that's a short prayer. And you know what? That's going to be oriented around asking for your selfish needs. That's what you think. People may think so. But the Ramban tells us it's a mitzvah, a Torah-itic mitzvah to pray in a time of need. To pray a short prayer. What a fabulous insight. That when someone is asking God for their own needs, it's not selfish, it's a mitzvah. You're doing the will of God. You're asking them for what you need. Perhaps you may say, you know what? I'm worried God's not going to listen. I'm worried, I'm not so righteous. I've done some sins. My prayer maybe is not effective. Wrong. King David says, Karov Hashem l'chol korav. God is close to all those who call out to him, provided that they do it with sincerity, provided that they call out with genuine sincerity. But if someone calls out to God with sincerity, God is close to them and God will listen to them. It's a promise. The Talmud talks about a thief that was burrowing in someone else's house to steal from them. And they were praying, please God, help me. Help this theft go well. Can you think of a more corrupt prayer? Help my crime. Let the authorities not catch me. Says the Talmud, that prayer from this person, criminal, sinner. That's an effective prayer. If you genuinely call to God, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, your prayer is effective. We have a direct line to the president. But not just a president that doesn't have any term limits. There's no checks and balances. There's no judiciary. There's no Congress that you have to answer to. an absolute monarch. We have a direct line to the Almighty. And while I'm not suggesting that we should neglect all the other things that we need to do to advance the agenda of our life, but we should not ignore the red telephone. Don't ignore the ability that you have to lobby God. And in fact, we believe that the Almighty is going to deliberately cause you challenges in your life. Not because He wants to make you miserable, not because He wants to make you suffer, quite the contrary, because He wants you to develop a connection with Him. And you're going to face conflict, you're going to face challenges in your life, and the reason for that is so that you ask God to help navigate that conflict, to navigate that dilemma, navigate that challenge. It's not like the prayer is there to resolve your difficult situation. It's the opposite. The difficult situation is there so that you pray. So the Talmud says. It's a wild insight. It's more than just, we have this amazing ability to pray and that's going to help us in our challenges. No, the only reason why we have challenges is so that we do pray. It's an amazing insight, the Talmud says. It's almost like the idea that we've shared in the past. The only reason why we get hungry and need food is because we should make a blessing on it. It's not like, hey, I need food. Everyone needs food. I don't want to forget about God. Let me give a blessing to it as well. It's the opposite. The only reason why the Almighty designed us that we do need food, it's only because He wants us to have the opportunity to connect to Him when we eat. And therefore, He makes us hungry. If we were never hungry, we would never make blessings before we eat because we wouldn't eat. That's a very powerful idea. That the difficulties in our life, the challenges, everything that we have in our life is going to be oriented and manipulated and orchestrated in a way that's going to give us opportunities to connect to God. And my radical proposal, or my controversial opinion, is that there's too much emphasis on the long prayer and not sufficient emphasis on the short prayer. Yes, ideally, we should be like Moses, not thinking about what we could gain out of it, not thinking about what's in it for us, not thinking about selfish needs. And maybe there's an advanced level that we have there. But the baseline, the beginner, the way we start our connection with God via prayer in my opinion, has to be via the short prayer. You need something, you want it. And don't wait till you need something big. I need a house, I need a car, I need a job. Everything that you do, you need the Almighty's help. Your heart's beating because the Almighty says to beat 89,000 times a day. Unless you have a rapid heart rate, it might be a little more or a little bit less. If your resting heart rate is maybe 40, it's really healthy. Or if it's 60, it's kind of normal. I think I have a high heartbeat. I think I'm just too excited. I'm pulsating with excitement. Maybe I'm eating too much salty foods. I don't know. One of the things. But we believe is that our world doesn't just continue to exist unless God turns off the spigot. God is continually infusing the world with vitality. Every second, the Almighty is involved with us in our lives, keeping us alive, keeping us active and vibrant, making sure that things are okay, protecting us, giving us sustenance and goodness in every area of our lives. Every moment is time for prayer. What kind of prayer? The altruistic prayer of Moshe? Maybe we'll get there. But I think the way to connect us to prayer, it has to be initially with a focus of what's in it for you. If you're going to take a test, you're worried how are you going to do in that test? Ask the Almighty for help, for insight, for wisdom. Every time I'm stopped by a cop, I'm always praying the whole time. It's great. If the Almighty ever wants me to pray, just those lights on behind me, and suddenly, whoa, where did this guy come from? Where did he come from? He's praying. What happened to him? I always talk about praying in the car, and then I'm forced to do it sometimes, right? And by the way, I've gotten out of some tickets. I've gotten out of a whole bunch of tickets as a result of prayer. I was caught red-handed. I was speeding. And I prayed, and it worked. Actually, I don't think I've ever... I once had to go to court. But it saved me a whole bunch of money. But I've never gotten a speeding ticket that I've actually paid. Actually, I think I once got one in. What do you say?
I said, how many warrants do you have now?
A warrant's a lot cheaper. No. So I did once get in Virginia. Apparently, Virginia is the worst state for speeding, because like they on every corner there's a cop, and I was driving all the way from Houston to New York, so I got caught and I was doing 79 in a 60-mile-an-hour zone, and apparently if it was like 80, they would have like confiscated the cars. I guess the Almighty did protect me. I paid it. Virginia's for lovers, and Virginia's for cops who like to give tickets to people driving safely. Anyhow, but this is an amazing power that we have. And the Jewish sources say, and this is scary because you'll see why it's scary. We talk about punishment after we die. So you can look at some of the sources that describe, fiery furnaces and the like. But I saw sources that say that the greatest punishment is that feeling that you had the winning lottery ticket and you put it in the shredder by mistake. That's the worst feeling, that feeling of what you could have had and what you forfeited because you were negligent. And our sages tell us that the agony of the missed opportunities is way worse than any punishment that any fire could do to us. And atop of that list is the agony of the lost opportunities, what I could have accomplished via prayer. We have the red telephone and we can call God. And he's going to listen to our prayer. If we reach out with sincerity, he is promising he's going to listen to us. And the idea that I wanted to share to the group, I know we've been talking about the divinity of the Torah. When we get back to it next time, I wasn't fully ready to do another session on that. So I said I'm going to share this idea because I think it's a very valuable idea. It's a life-changing idea. We have to train ourselves and our children and our communities to pray. And there's different kinds of prayers, Rashi tells us. And there's different situations that call for different kinds of prayers. There's the prayer which is legitimate. Jewish nation surrounded by their enemies, they call it to God. It's a legitimate prayer. It's a proper prayer. It's not a selfish prayer. It's the right thing to do. They act like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the right thing to do. Moshe did the incorrect prayer because the situation called for the short prayer, and instead he supplemented it with the long prayer. What this is telling us is it's providing us cover. We know that when someone prays for a need that they have, that is like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't feel bad. Don't feel selfish. Oh, I don't want to ask for it. No, you have the opportunity. You have the telephone. Use it. And I think if we focus on that, every time we have a conflict in life, every time we have a difficult phone call to make, every time we have a challenge with our coworkers, with our bosses, with our spouses, with our children, with the cop behind us, whatever it is, any difficult situation we have the Almighty. And we can reach out to the Almighty and offload some of our angst to Him with prayer. And I think that is going to actually foster a close relationship between man and God, between human and God. And I look at my grandfather and I look at the prayer that he had and the deep connection that he had with it. And I want to speculate at least, that the reason why I don't have the same connection, maybe because, I'll grow into it, hopefully. I don't know, maybe. I'm not as righteous. But I think part of it is that prayer was always presented to me as some sort of formal thing. And yes, there is the formal aspect of prayer. There is the long prayer. But we cannot forget about the basic, rudimentary prayer, the prayer of the short prayer, the prayer of a time of need, and that doesn't have to be a big need. It doesn't have to be a life-threatening crisis. We need stuff every day. Every day we have an opportunity to pray to God. And I think if we do that, it's a much more natural way to get started with our connection. This is the most immediate connection we have with God. It's one of the 3 pillars of our spiritual life is prayer, along with Torah and good deeds. And it's something we cannot ignore in our spiritual development. And the way I think we should approach it is starting off by saying, what do I need today? What do I need this hour? And let me just speak to the Almighty. In what language? I don't know Hebrew so well. It doesn't matter. The Almighty is proficient in all the languages that you know, and then some. We don't just pray in our head. We don't just think about prayer. We have to speak it out. We don't have to feel weird. Do it when no one else is watching, but pray. Pray short prayers, and that, I'm convinced, will deepen your relationship, our relationship with God, and will put us on this track of making prayer something exciting, something that we look forward to each day, and something that really is, we're never alone. We always have the Almighty with us, and He's always helping us at every step of our life. That was the day I wanted to share. Please, God, next time, it's not going to be next week. It'll probably be the week or afterwards or the week following that. We're going to get back to the eighth principle of the divinity of the Torah that we talked about in previous weeks. There's some cool stuff that I saw. I'm adding it to my document, but it wasn't ready. I don't want to come to give you guys anything half-baked. Do you want half-baked? You don't want half-baked, right? You want fully baked. So we're going to fully bake it over the next couple of weeks, and I will be in touch as to when exactly we'll do it. Again, thank you all for your friendship and your support and being here for us week after week, and for supporting our campaign. Again, it's a total pleasure to have y'all as friends, and as again, it means so much to me to know that I have these, go to Humble, Texas, and all these friends, and we study Torah together, and we wrestle with these deep questions week after week and year after year, and I hope we can do it for many years to come. And again, thank you for being our partners and our friends and our supporters, and here's to another great year in 2020. Okay, is there any questions, comments?
I'm thinking a good analogy for the prayers in a time of need, because a lot of people worry that they don't want to bother God.
Yeah.
They're always asking for something